This is Siobhan Live with Desley Humphrey.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the program. We are having a healthy show today, and now we're switching things up a little bit and going to be talking about our kids and their leadership skills. I guess having a healthy leadership identity is all part of life, and introducing it to our kids is very important. And I am fortunate enough to welcome to the studio Amam Merchant, the founder and Chief Imagination Officer of Future Leadership Academy. Amam, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, nice to be here, Desley.
Now, you have set up a venture to focus on developing leadership and thinking in children. Now, it's interesting from the ages of 3 to 24 in this region, but you've also set yourself this lofty goal of being responsible for developing 1 million young future leaders across the Middle East by 2015. Now, that's a hefty goal in anyone's mind, so, how's it going so far?
Well, we've got our first 20, so you're on the way.
You've got your first 20. Well, that's wonderful.
We've hit the ground running, so you still have some way to go, but you start somewhere, as they say. Yeah, I mean, when you're kind of doing something different, you need to have crazy goals as well, so you kind of get motivated to kind of get up in the morning to get something done.
Now, you have sitting beside you Dr. Alan Nelson, the founder and CEO of Kid Lead. Now, Dr. Nelson is an international authority on developing leadership in children. Welcome firstly to Dubai, to the Middle East, and to our little studios here.
Thanks very much. It's an honor to be here.
Well, now, Amam, if you could just explain, how did you connect with Dr. Nelson, and you brought him here.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about, you've got some boot camps that have been underway for kids. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, the process of getting in touch with Dr. Nelson began nearly 2 years ago, as I just kind of checked my emails to discover when I actually began that contact, and it really was born out of this desire at that time. I have a 8-year-old boy, and who was about 6 and a bit at that time, and there were some experiences he was going through in school which led me to feel that his leadership, I guess, appetite wasn't being fully met with in the school he was, and that began a sort of introspection sort of exercise to see what is it that probably could be done to help him. So what began as a domestic issue, then I thought it became a local issue, then I realized very soon it's a global issue. And I tried to look around for people who were doing this, and there weren't a lot. But there was one who was standing out, and Dr. Nelson, Kid Lead in the US, was definitely high up there, and connected with him to understand what we could do. So the boot camps that we are doing this week to kick off our series of activities is something that we have put together in partnership with Kid Lead, using their techniques and content, and I think we've seen some great feedback from children who have gone through it so far.
Great. And so, Dr. Nelson, just tell us, a leadership boot camp for 10 to 13-year-olds. Now, I have a 1-year-old. I can only imagine at 10 to 13, firstly, the attention span, but also the list of activities that kids do, and also reading and writing and learning. How do you fit in a boot camp, and how important is it to consider doing these kind of leadership things for a 10 to 13-year-old?
Well, I think if you go back to the beginning of sort of how I got into it, most people who work with leaders who do leadership development really work with adults, because almost in every culture I'm discovering, leadership is something adults do. We say to kids, oh, someday you'll be a leader,
yeah, exactly.
You can be a leader. But having worked, for over a decade with adults, and still I'm a lecturer at the Naval Postgraduate School, so I still work with adult leaders. But the bottom line is, let's be honest, adults don't change much. Adult leaders don't change much. So when I looked at midlife, what do I want to do second half? I said, boy, return on investment really is low with adults. So we started playing around with the idea, what if we took similar methods, similar content that you would get in an executive training program, and what if we age-sized it to leaders while the leaders are moldable? So this is really not a kids program, it's really a leadership program, but we're working with leaders while they're very pliable. So what we've discovered is that these kids who have the aptitude to lead, that by the age of 10 you can teach them very sophisticated social skills that would surprise you how effective they are, but they learn to do that in their sort of way by active learning. So it's not a lecture, it's not a talking head, you don't read books on it. We actually bring them in, and through some trainers who've been certified to use these materials, they take them through activities, and these students take turns leading their peers, and they love it. Not only do they love it, but they actually learn how to lead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, going back to this loving part, we've got some children who've kind of finish. They kind of start at 7:30 or 8 a.m. in the morning. They finish from school at 3. They come to our boot camp at 4, go until about 7, and at 8:30 they're still active and energetic. And their parents, we met some of them today, they were like, well, they're having exams and they still want to come back. And you ask them, well, how does this compare to school? They're like, school's all about work. This is fun.
So how do you make, I mean, it's the old adage, how do you make learning fun? But then how do you make learning about such an important life skill? How do you make that fun?
Well, we enjoy what we're good at. So first of all, we find out who are those kids who are good at it naturally. They may be on the in the classroom, they may be in the sports field, they may be in the neighborhood, but these are the kids who sort of are the Pied Pipers. They're the influencers, good or bad. They get their friends and their peers to do things that they normally wouldn't do. And you talk about your 1-year-old, that's a little bit young, but we see that it's as early as preschool and even before. So we're actually working on a program now for ages 2 through 9 that will allow all the kids to enjoy playtime together, but we'll identify those kids who sort of have an extra ability to get their friends to do things in playtime activities.
Okay, well, how do you
and then develop them?
How do you recognize a leader? How, if I'm sitting in the playground and I'm seeing a bunch of kids, how would I spot a leader in the making?
It's a great question, because sometimes we will actually train people. We'll take them to a playground, we'll take them to a lunchroom, some place that basically there's not a teacher or an adult authority that's telling the kids what to do. And what you'll find is that there are probably 10 to 20% of the kids who have about 70 to 80% of the influence. They're the kids who will determine what table you sit at, who's going to sit by me, when it's time to get up and go play the game, what game we're going to play. Even as early as preschool, you can see those little kids who are kind of sometimes bossing their friends around, or they're organizing their friends to play teacher, play house, whatever. And then they assign the roles. You be the daddy, you be the mommy, you be the teacher, I'll be the leader. And those are some of those early indicators.
Well, even at home, for example, it would be, these kids are not just sitting around waiting to be told. They kind of have a voice and they have an idea and they want to be kind of heard. And I guess that's where the role of the parent comes in as well. How willing and I guess tolerant is the parent in allowing that to happen.
What about the kids, though, that they're good followers, they can take instruction, and they're not necessarily the one bossing everyone around or telling everyone what to do, but the kids that take instruction, can they be potential leaders as well?
Well, a lot of it comes down to how you define leadership. Some people, and the most common definition of leadership really is being a good citizen, being responsible for yourself. If you define leadership that way, hopefully all of us can learn those skills. As we work up the ladder in complexity, we talk more about organizational leadership. That means the ability to cast vision. That means the ability to change the organization and to get a larger group of people to do things they wouldn't normally do. So the more complex it becomes, the more you have to rely on aptitude and talent, and then the development of that talent. So obviously what we do at very young ages is we want to identify those who maybe have the ability to learn more complex, and then as they get older, we want to give them more complex challenges. So it is sort of a vetting process.
And, again, every child has that genius within him, and that genius may not be the leader type. It may be the artistic type, and it may be a leader in the artistic realm, but that may not be organizational leadership. It could be, what is that middle area? So it could be situational leadership, that he or she is able to take charge of a situation because the circumstances allowed him or her to do that, but he would not be doing that all the time as well. Okay,
so what are some of the things that kids will learn in the boot camps? So how do you teach leadership?
Well, this program that we have launched this week is based on content that KidLead has researched over several years, and they've looked at the 16 most desirable leadership qualities, and we're looking at 4 of those this week. For instance, we're looking at the concepts of power, communication, ethics, and honor. And each of these 4 areas have then got activities built around them, exercises and activities. So let's say in a 90-minute session, they'll be doing 3 different activities, which are running around doing different things. We had some children eat garlic the other day, by the way, because that was the result of a choice their leader made, and they had to live with the choices with that leader. So at the end of it, they're like, oh well, don't come close to me, have that garlic. But it's all fun and make them enjoy that experience as opposed to kind of like a lecture, because that kind of makes it not very active.
Well, I guess, and it's interesting thinking about how do you teach honour to a 10-year-old? How do you teach honour to a 10-year-old?
Well, I think that's a great question, because at the preteen age, that most 10, 11, 12-year-olds, that's where they are basically concrete thinkers. So it's almost like teaching a 2 or 3-year-old how to understand things like an apple. You hold up an apple and you say, "This is an apple," and you show them. So in a more complex development of that, we would say honor. So honor is very conceptual. It's very difficult to understand. So we do an activity and we say, now that was honor. So we help them identify an experience, and then we label it, and so they're able to understand it that way, so that then they can replicate it.
All right, well, I have in the studio Aman Merchant and Dr. Alan Nelson, the kings of leadership and teaching our kids in a leadership boot camp. We need to go to a break, but if you have any questions for our knowledgeable guests or any kind of comments about your children, text in 4001. They're here and therefore happy to answer any questions. We'll be back in a moment after this.
This is Siobhan Live with Desley Humphrey.
Good afternoon and welcome back to our very special program that we are looking at the health of our children's leadership skills. I have with me in the studio Aman Merchant, the Chief Imagination Officer of Future Leadership Academy, and Dr. Alan Nelson, the founder of Kid Lead. Now, these two guys have put together the Leadership Boot Camp, which has been underway over the past little while, and we've been talking about giving skills to the 10 to 13-year-olds of leadership. Now, before the break, we were talking about, how you teach leadership and how that works. But I wonder, how can a parent identify that their child has leadership abilities or perhaps doesn't have leadership abilities, and how can they be sure that they don't indirectly squash those abilities by, telling their children what to do? How does it all work?
Well, we actually have an online assessment that the Future Leadership Academy is going to be adapting for Dubai and for the Middle East. So right now, a parent, a teacher, someone can go online and actually fill out that questionnaire for those students, and you really want to do it for a student, because we're really not self-aware until mid-teen years. So that's a technical way of doing it. A more organic way of doing it is just sort of observing kids who have sort of that initiation of ideas of projects, who are a bit maybe more creative, and also good at organizing kids either their age or younger in activities. Some of the unfortunate results is that sometimes in schools or sometimes at home, a parent perceives these things as rebelliousness or having too many opinions or being too strong-willed. And those are all just the fledgling approach that we as leaders do to sort of exercise our wings. We're sprouting our wings, and sometimes we're awkward and gangly. So sometimes that's perceived as rebelliousness. They get sent out to the principal's office, they get in trouble, and then a well-meaning adult can sometimes discourage a young leader because they don't realize that they're just trying to be what they're good at, what they naturally will do most of their life, and they end up squelching them. So that's very unfortunate, and part of what we do and what Future Leadership Academy is going to do is help train and re-educate parents, re-educate teachers and educators on how to deal with these kids so that we help them thrive and we don't discourage them.
Is that what you found, Mum? That's just
Well, I mean,
how it works?
with the educational system here, I mean, there's a very heavy focus on, in a sense, preparing them for exams as opposed to preparing them for life. There are some schools that probably do it better than others, but for the large part, the focus is, and someone I met recently called it that our system suffers from exam sickness and great addiction. So I think the idea of preparing and facing up to a child who's got these talents is a difficult one, because as you probably know, people say that there's only going to be one leader. It's a household, in a classroom, etc. So if someone says that this is not how it is, that's getting questioned, and that child may feel, well, is something wrong with me then? And he's feeling suppressed. So there are many experiences of children who have to adopt a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality because they realize that at home they have to play a certain act, and outside they play a different act.
And with when I think about this, like putting the kids on a boot camp, how do they then re-enter the world of children that haven't been trained in leadership skills, and how do they re-enter the home with all these leadership skills under their belt? Well, without too much of a,
Well, I think one thing that is sort of a misperception is that we're creating these high-octane kids who are now going to take over everything. Actually, it's almost the inverse. We teach the very strong kids who would be bossy how to be appropriate, how not to be bossy, but to exude their influence in a positive way. We teach those who perhaps lack confidence how to have more confidence, how to step into a social situation, to identify other influencers, and then to, in a positive way, get them to act proactively. So really it's about teaching them to be effective and to be ethical so that they're not bossy and they're not unhealthy.
And this is how I think it works to support schools and teachers as opposed to creating a sort of disruptive and sort of, a revolution environment, because we're trying to make sure that this makes it easier for a teacher to work with these children because they understand them better. As opposed to treating them as a disruption.
Exactly.
And once they do complete this leadership program or the leadership boot camps, where can they then also enhance those skills? Is there any follow-up options, and do you guys follow the kids once they've gone through the boot camps?
So the way the boot camp has been structured as that we've launched this week as a concentrated 4-day exercise, but the way the program normally runs is 90 minutes every week or a weekend probably, or an after-school activity, and at the end of every session they're given a leadership challenge which they work with their parents on. So the idea is that they take that concept back at home or in their school so they can reflect on those ideas with their parents. We actually have their parents sign the sheet, for example, of this leadership challenge, such that they can think about this outside that experiential classroom setting that we have created for them. So it kind of allows that to do that. And once they've gone through all these different sessions that we do, and there are about 32 of those, by the way, then we are looking to create an alumni club of these leaders so that they can engage with one another, because obviously, like meets like, and the kind of dominance means dominance. How do you kind of figure out how to control that and manage that? We've seen that this week as well, where 3 dominant types met together. It was interesting to see the dynamics. They hadn't met before, and they were working hard initially on day 1 to fight who's going to win. They realize very soon that all of them are the same type, and they need to work to live with each other and listen to each other. And that again is part of what Dr. Nelson was saying. They get more disciplined because they realize they're not the only types.
Maybe Dr. Nelson, you can answer this question. I've had a couple of programs where we were talking about children or teenagers being thrown into groups and having to work together, and there being a distinctive difference between, say, American kids or British kids and the Gulf kids or UAE kids or Emiratis here. Have you noticed any significant difference with cultural backgrounds to how the kids respond to being leaders?
Well, there are definitely cultural backgrounds, and there are family personality issues. So, for example, our work in Thailand, when we worked with our partners there, they said we're going to have to do a lot more parent training, because even though they want the best for their children, sometimes going back into the house environment, it's where mom and or dad are in charge. And I was raised obviously as an American in the Midwest, but I still had that sort of experience where my dad was very autocratic. There was only room for one leader, and if I had an opinion, it was perceived as rebelliousness. So at home, I sort of went into my cave. At school, I came out of my cave, and I was sort of the class clown and or playground leader. So I think what we try to do, regardless of culture, is help parents, help adults to understand and adapt and appreciate the strengths of their child. So as Aman was saying before, the goal is for all of us to help our children find their strengths. This program specifically is to help those kids who have a strength in the area of influence and leadership to develop that effectively both in the classroom, after class, in the home, in the community.
Well, I wonder though, can you be a little bit more specific as far as what you experienced in this boot camp? The UAE and Dubai is a melting pot of cultures. Were there any nationalities that really stood out as natural leaders, or was it just a case of individual kids?
In my experience of having seen kids now in different parts of the world, what I told Aman was I was very impressed, because a lot of times when you have a brand new group of students, you're sort of looking for warm bodies, just a bunch of kids in the room where we can train the trainers how to use the curriculum. My takeaway is that for whatever reason, I think this is a great area, probably because there's so many people coming who are entrepreneurs, who are leaders, who are sort of achievement oriented, because this is such a fast-paced melting pot. I was impressed with so many of the kids who had the ability, but also they had the sensitivity to the other kids and to some of the different cultural differences. So my takeaway is I'm very impressed. I think there's an overabundance of leader-type kids in this area. I didn't see any dominant ethnicities or cultures, and that was impressive too.
I think that's curious because a lot of the kids from different backgrounds, in my understanding, they were born here. So they don't know any other way but this multicultural community. So I find that fascinating that you didn't have any one in particular culture or ethnicity that was shining.
Right.
But how many kids signed up to the boot camp and participated, and have you got much of a demand for this kind of thing?
Well, we have a lot of positive feedback. We have about 20 kids that attended, which were between the ages of 10 to 13, and the idea was to run it in that focused manner because we were having interest to have more kids, but because it was the launch session, we wanted to be careful and make sure we kind of deliver the experience we intend to deliver. Later this month, we're going to be opening it to the public and obviously have more children who will participate in that. But the reaction we've got from parents has been very, very warm. In fact, there was sort of a quiet apprehension as to what they're going to be in for when their children finish today. And so we had to kind of give them sort of a heads up, and today afternoon when we actually finish the boot camp, we have a bit more of a sort of preparation sort of for them as well as parents as to what to kind of face up to.
Okay, we only have a little bit more of time left. So how much does it cost, and how often do the kids have to come to these kind of classes?
The program runs in the 4 modules. Each module takes place over 8 sessions, which could be running in 8 weeks. And each of these modules that we run in Dubai is costing about 1,200 dirhams per module, and then apart from any registration fees that may be associated with that.
Okay, well, where can people find out more details about all of the Future Leadership Academy programs?
They can call us on our toll-free number, which is 800-LEAD, which is 5323, or they can go to our website, which is www.futureleadershipacademy.org.
Okay, and Dr. Nelson, the questionnaire, the online questionnaire that you were mentioning a little earlier, is that on the website, or is that?
It will be on our website very shortly, yes.
Okay. Well, Aman Merchant and Dr. Alan Nelson, thank you very much for being here, and all the very best, and good luck with that target of 1 million young future leaders, Aman. We'll be keeping an eye on you.
Well, your child will have entered in that category by that time.
In a little while. So do you think she could make the 1 million mark?
She will be the millionth.
Okay, well, we'll count on that. All right, well, thank you very much for being here, and thanks to everyone for those messages, and we will go to the ARN News Centre. We'll be back with plenty more. Stay tuned for the Super Granny. She's up next.
This is Siobhan Live with Desley Humphrey in association